This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law. I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey, y'all, I'm Molly Barrows, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, where Pam and I cover some of the most scandalous crimes and cases that bubble up right here in Northwest Florida and beyond, because we all know that when crazy happens here, crazy just like it happens other places. So oftentimes we find a lot of common themes. So we invite you, if you would, to please like and subscribe if you're watching our YouTube channel, and comment as well as wherever you're listening. We love your comments. We try to get back to them as soon as we can. If I miss them, then just be sure to yell at me. I'll be sure to listen. So at any rate, Pam Hill, of course, is my co-host per usual. She has experienced sadly violent crime in her own family. If you're familiar with the podcast, then you know that that is the case. And we love to hear her take on a lot of these cases. We've got a lot of ground to cover for you today. We're talking about 3 national cases that actually connect back to some cases that we have here too. And then we're going to update you on some local cases that we've been following here that actually connect back to some national legislation that's happening, like the Take It Back Act, or the Take It Down Act, I should say. So we've got a lot to cover, and we're going to get right down to it. This episode is called Threefer: Penelope McGee, Gerald Radford, and Kanye West. I guess they call him Ye these days.
Ye, that's right. Kanye. Kanye.
I know.
Well, he's interesting, and so is his, I guess, former girlfriend.
Yeah. Oh, of course. You know, my daughter loves the Kardashians, and I've watched that reality show more than I've ever watched any reality show. And at first I was like, why are we watching this? And then I realized I love this. And now I have my favorite Kardashians, you know,
Okay.
like I do. Anyway, so
Yeah.
I certainly have watched them talk about Ye, I guess, as he likes to be called, or is it Ye?
Ye.
Can we just say Kanye?
We
Because
can
I
say
know
Kanye.
how to
We
say
really
that.
don't even have to say it too much at all.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, we'll get to that a little bit later, but our first case is going to be talking about Penelope McGee. And this episode, if you will, a sub-episode title is He Said, She Said, Now He's Dead, the Penelope McGee story. This is out of Massachusetts. We've covered a few cases out of there. We've been following some. Same judge is handling this case, has handled some of the others that we've talked about. Sandra Birchmore, the young woman that was she basically was the intern for the police department up there, and then she got pregnant by these officers. They'd accused of grooming her, and then one of them was accused of killing her because she was pregnant. So same judge that heard the Sandra Birchmore case and the Karen Reed case is now hearing the Penelope McGee case. So let me tell you, Massachusetts has got some interesting cases.
Yeah, they
we had
do.
Brian Ward there too.
We did. Well, you know, it's interesting because people were saying, ain't y'all got more than one judge up there? You know, because Judge Cannone, that's her name, Beverly Cannone, or Cannone, they call her Auntie Bev because everybody up there's kind of integrated or whatever. And the Karen Reed case, not to get too far off base on this, the Karen Reed case is like nothing you've ever seen. She's got fans, and it mobilized a movement, and
saw that.
Turtle Boy, and then there's the people that wear pink for Karen Reed, and then the people that wear blue for Officer John O'Keefe. And see, here
The
we
one
are.
who died.
Right. We know this case is the Karen Reed case because she's the one that is being brought into court for the death of him. But Officer O'Keefe is just lost in the shuffle. So we're working on that one, but you know, we come at it from the victim's point of view.
Always. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, I was watching a little bit and how they were gearing up to try her again, and just looking at her and knowing the little bit that I do know about the case, she just seems like a hard biatch to me.
Really?
You know, like that was kind of my take on her, just listening to her and watching her. But I know a lot of people support her and believe that she's innocent. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this case again.
You just don't know, because it's just like all these cases. You just don't know. We do have a jury system, and we also have a bench trial.
That's
And
right.
that's what this case was about. Penelope McGee said, look, I'm being brought up in here for arguing with somebody and they drop dead. So I don't think I want a jury because somebody in there might just have argued with somebody. Anyway, she wants Judge Beverly Cannone to be the trier of fact.
Interesting. And so if you're not familiar with Penelope McGee, she was charged and tried for basically killing her husband. And he had a heart attack while they were arguing. And the prosecution said that she was responsible for a number of reasons that Pam's going to explain. And they just had her trial. So before we get into what the jury decided, we want to tell you a little bit about the case, especially for those folks who haven't heard about it before. So how did Penelope end up being tried for his murder if he had a heart attack?
Well, Penelope's 58 years old. She's referred to as a socialite. Her ex-husband, his name is Andrew Savitz. He was an environmental consultant. He was one of the main folks in the campaign that Michael Dukakis, when he ran for president, and he's an author. He wrote a book called The Triple Bottom Line. So he's connected money-wise, politically. Penelope's from a family in Rhode Island that's connected politically. And she's been the CEO of some major companies in her past. And she's also done something called Women in Philanthropy. All right. So here she is. She's kind of a statuesque lady, kind of reddish hair. She's pretty. So she and her ex-husband were arguing what brought this on.
So he was an ex-husband? They weren't married at the time?
Yeah, but they're divorced. That even makes it worse.
Yes.
What brought it on was Andrew. He has a brother named John, and Penelope was living in one of their properties. So at a certain point, I guess John sent her an email, and it said, you're evicted. You need to get out of our properties. So it upset her, so she went over there to discuss it, went over to her ex-husband's house to discuss it, and they got in an argument. So she says that he pushed her and pulled her hair, and as things go, and then he can't say anything because he's dead. But their daughter, Zuzi, it starts with a Z, and it's U-Z-I, I think, or a couple of Z's. Got like 2 or 3 Z's in it. And she's 18, and she says Mama was the aggressor, and that she was up in her room, and she heard them scuffling, and she came down and she was like, stop it. And she calls 911, and you can hear her yelling at her parents. But to make this even crazier, Susie and Penelope are estranged. I don't know the reason. They didn't really say the reason. So they've been estranged. So you can kind of see.
Well, it sounds like she was living with her dad if she came downstairs.
She was. And her little brother was up there too. So this was going on. And they say that Penelope should have known that he had heart problems or diabetes and stuff.
Oh, come on.
Well, that's what they say.
You don't know that somebody's your heart's going to quit.
You don't know that, but here's their part on the folks going against her, the prosecution, are saying, well, you were his health advocate. We've even got texts back and forth where you wrote his brothers, and this is what, I think it's just bad blood. During a divorce, people just take sides and act like the other person didn't exist before. They're a terrible human being now, or whatever it is they do. Well, she had gone to the hospital with her ex-husband before.
So basically he was in bad health, heart-wise, diabetes-wise, and they say that she pushed him to the limit knowing that he might tip over and die.
Right. That's what they say. But so when they were arguing, he had pushed her, she says, it's a he said, she said, there's broken plates in the kitchen. That was there when they got there. But her brother-in-law said, you should have known. He just keeps saying that because she had written him a text that said, stay away. He has designated me as his health advocate. You all are a bunch of bastards. Stay away. So that kind of primed the pump for him to send an email that says, get out of my house.
Well, I'll be interested to hear what the medical examiner had to say. And the little bit that I have read, it does indicate that the medical examiner thought that this altercation on top of his health problems led to his demise. I think it's a bit of a stretch, in my opinion, for the prosecutors to say, people can't necessarily help when they're feeling passionate about something. They're in the middle of this contentious divorce. Of course, she's not going to be like, well, let me rein in my emotions because this guy's diabetic and has a bad heart and it might kill him. I can't imagine anybody in their right mind would think about that. And it, like I said, it sort of reminds me of back in the day when I first started covering officers that were carrying tasers, and people started to die after they got tased. And, they'd do these autopsies, and it would turn out that they had drugs in their system, and that with, a live electrical pulse stopped their heart. So, you have these pre-existing conditions. Somebody's in bad shape because they've been abusing drugs. Their heart's already working overtime because they're high on cocaine. And then they get electrocuted, and it's going to kill them. Well, that wasn't the officer's intention necessarily to kill them. They were behaving badly. They were, whatever the case may be, they felt in fear of their life, and they felt like, or this was supposed to be like a way to detain somebody, not necessarily end their life. And it sounds to me in some ways this was a similar situation. If this is her story that he was coming after her, whether or not who was coming after anybody, I still don't know that she was necessarily trying to kill him, and she wasn't responsible for his pre-existing health conditions.
Right. It's definitely an overcharge.
Yes.
They overcharged. And for manslaughter, she could have faced 20 years. So I was watching this because, even does that mean like you're on a debate team and you argue better? I can't even say that word. Argue better than the other person.
Right.
And they drop dead, it's your fault. Or you have what's called an eggshell plaintiff. And they say you take your plaintiff as you find them, is what the lawyers were saying. Because when I was watching this, I was thinking, if she gets convicted, this will set a very dangerous precedent.
Definitely.
With people. Because, you've seen people, some people can handle a lot of stuff and some people can't. I figure if you can't handle some stuff, you need to remove yourself from a situation. I've got my own self geeked up before, thinking about something,
Definitely.
or listening to something, or remembering, even like Sharon's murder. I have to stop my head from that sometime because I literally can feels like AFib or chest pains and stuff. And I literally think, I don't want to die here by myself. Let me get on the phone with somebody.
Right.
It's not anybody's fault like that. But the medical director or the ME, medical examiner, I was watching her and I was like, I don't think you're fair. I feel like you're prejudiced because she saw everything also, what everybody saw, the autopsy and stuff, but then she went back and read the police report, which I'm sure they do too, but she only selected certain things. She cherry-picked the police report on there, and she was damned and determined to say that Penelope McGee is the cause of him dying. And she just kept on and on and on, and basically they impeached her. The defense attorneys impeached her, but she was doubling down on that. She was not going to give up on that.
Interesting. I wonder if their political status impacted that at all. I know it's not supposed to play a role, but you can't help it. People know each other. They're familiar. They run in similar circles. I'm just curious if that played a part.
It could have been, but she's politically connected also.
That's my point. Yeah. They're all politically connected.
Exactly.
So maybe this taking sides a little bit.
Right. But in court, what we do is you've got the prosecution and the defense. The defense basically looked like they were like, we're not calling anybody at all. Not even her, because she was basically going to have to claim self-defense. And on self-defense, you usually have to get up there and tell your own story if it's self-defense, because nobody can tell it better than you can. Like Brian Camp did. But so I thought she would testify, or at least they'd have their expert or a doctor to come on there to mitigate or go against or give their point of view, but they didn't. And, sometimes things get so messy, and this isn't a jury, this is a judge. So the judge has it all there. Mm-hmm. So they had closing statements, and they talked about Penelope and her daughter seeing it, and the lawyer can say, hey, I think she's kind of prejudiced because she's not talking to her mama right now, living with her daddy. But there was different facts on, did Penelope try CPR or did she call 911? Well, she didn't have to. Zusi called. And Penelope said she did try CPR. And the police got there and they couldn't do anything else other than that.
He was gone.
He was gone. So the medical examiner uses that as part of her decision. But all those are events. Those aren't necessary. He had atherosclerosis, he had hypertension, he had diabetes, and he had kidney problems. Mm-hmm. And he was 66. He wasn't old at all. So this arguing and stuff, he could have stopped arguing any time. Basically, what they're trying to say is homicide by heart attack, and that Penelope caused it. And so they had their closing arguments, and they would go as what you would think, prosecution saying, yeah, she did it. Defense going, that's his fault. She can't help it, type of thing. So Judge Beverly Canone, she listened to all the closing arguments, and it wasn't even hardly a nanosecond. She just went ahead and gave her verdict, and she said that she was not guilty.
It sounds like it never really should have been brought to trial.
It shouldn't have, because it's so dangerous. Think about it. We've all seen that War of the Roses, with that crazy movie. I literally held my breath because it was so terrible. But it sounds like they were having like what's a typical spat, even not necessarily ex-wife, ex-husband, of like a spat people have when they disagree. I don't believe in like throwing plates and stuff or pushing and hair pulling and all that kind of stuff. And a little bit of that did go on, they said. But I mean, can you imagine if that was a guilty verdict? What could follow after that?
No, it's just too subjective. And I mean, he is responsible for his own health, even if turns out that some of that's genetic. I mean, she has no control over how he took care of himself, and whether or not she was aware of those health problems. You have to prove that. You'd have to be a pretty sharp mastermind of medicine, as well as just the human psyche, to be like, well, here's an opportunity. We're mad. I'm just going to keep being mad just for the sake of taking him out. That just seems like a bit of a stretch. That's what makes me wonder, because, you talked about his political connections and how, Andy Savitz had even been, connected to Michael Dukakis. So I just wonder if all of that didn't play a role, that maybe the family was putting pressure on the district attorney's office up there to do something, hold them accountable, because they're angry. They're upset that they've lost their brother, their father, whatever. And it sounds like the mom was already on the outs. Penelope was already on the outs. So it was just one more step. And I'm sure in their hearts, they really do believe she's responsible. But I just don't. I'm glad the judge made the decision that she did. That just didn't seem fair.
Right. Well, it's so petty. It's almost like Petty Crocker. They're just in there. That Massachusetts up there, it seems like something that should be so simple. Their cases get so lathered up and extra stuff going on in it. I'm sure it happens everywhere, but it just seems like it.
It does. Well, it reminds me a lot of what happened with Brian Camp, too. He's the one that was the episode that we called Don't FAFO with Brian Camp, because he took out this man that broke into his family's apartment. He was sound asleep. The guy came in with the intent of killing him. He had briefly dated Brian's baby's mama, and I guess it was more to him than it was to her. And he thought that Brian was the only thing standing in the way of this romance that he wanted with the girlfriend. So he ends up shooting him. And after they fought each other for 20 minutes in this apartment, and Brian's fighting for his life, he has no idea who this guy is, doesn't realize that he's a jealous ex-lover. And the guy came with a knife. So Brian finally manages to get a gun, shoots him. He's not dead at that point, but some minutes later, he starts to move again, and Brian shoots him again. And he'd already called 911. Nobody had arrived yet. He had checked on his family in between. And then they turn around and charge him with basically, I think, second-degree murder it was, or some sort of homicide charge, not first degree, but some sort of charge. And he ends up becoming not guilty. But I thought, why would you even take that to court? So in some ways, it's interesting compared to Florida. We have your stand your ground. That would have never even made it to court in Florida. And I'm not saying that like, yay, Florida. But, in this case, I don't think that was necessarily something that they could win to take that to court. But Massachusetts, in that regard, I do think good for them for at least exploring every option and making sure that the law was followed. Whereas Florida, sometimes I feel like they just take the first version they hear and then, do away with it instead of really exploring and diving in to see, is this really what happened? Is this the truth? I feel like we use stand your ground far too much in this state. And it's not necessarily justified. That's just my personal opinion. But in the case of, Brian Camp, I think it certainly was.
Right. Because stand your ground, we all understand it with castle doctrine, like in your own home. But like, we've got a case coming up later about stand your ground in Florida. It's going to be Florida again.
Yeah, yet again.
You don't get to just go everywhere you want to, plant yourself and go, now I'm standing my ground at the zoo or Cordova Mall or whatever, and anybody that bothers me, I'm going to stand my ground. It's a little bit different. But Penelope, they called her the socialite, and I didn't exactly know why on that, other than she probably travels in high circles and stuff, because if she's such a socialite, him telling her to get out of the house, like, just get a new one, type of thing. So I think sometimes they name these things a little differently. But she did sit there. She did have very good decorum, and she was very classy. And you could tell she didn't make herself up as she normally did, because I saw pictures also. But she looked pretty and wore her little sweaters that were wrapped around her neck and stuff. So, I mean, I felt sorry for her, because I was sitting there thinking, if this goes the other way, you're 56 years old or whatever it is, mid-50s, you will be 70-something for 20 years of manslaughter, because it can go either way. We see that. We see that it can go either way, with the jury especially.
Yeah, you never know. Well, I'm happy for her that it didn't work out that way, but it's still sad that he passed for his family. So, well, thanks for the update on that, Pam.
You're welcome.
Well, that was interesting on Penelope McGee. And now we're moving on to the second story that we're tackling in this threefer. And this is a man, we talked about the stand your ground and how we were going to touch on a case that's similar to that right here in Florida. Well, this is the one. And the fella's name is Gerald Radford. And he was charged with second-degree murder for basically killing a gay man at a Tampa dog park last year. So it's an interesting case. These two men had a history going back for some time, but the actual event when this gay man was killed, it just seems like it was a bit of an overreach, you know, to for this guy to say he was standing his ground at the dog park. So you've got the details, and I'm interested in learning a little bit more about this. I've been watching it somewhat, but I think you know a little bit more about it. So, so how did this, before we tell you what came of the trial, we'll tell you a little bit about the case itself.
Okay. This guy named Gerald Radford, and the other guy's name is Walt DeLay. Walt is an openly gay man, and Gerald Radford, he was a Marine, and I think he has dual citizenship in Ireland. I'll tell you that because, like, he wears a shirt that says Irish Mixed Martial Arts.
Okay.
You know? And it's been my experience that you don't wear a shirt that says something like that unless you can stand behind it. You know, you don't.
Part of his identity being an Irish whoop-ass kind of a guy.
A tough guy.
Yes.
Okay. And he's bald-headed, and he's 66 years old. And Walt, I think, is in his mid-50s. So our guy, Gerald Radford, tough guy, he was saying his day starts out in the mornings where he gets him a cup of tea with some honey in it. He drinks that, and he talks to his wife a little bit, he said. And then he said at 7:30 every morning, he goes to the dog park. Well, Walt Lay goes to the dog park almost every day, too. But Gerald, our tough guy, he's kind of in a funk right now. He's moping around because he lost one of his animals. He loves dogs, and he lost one of his dogs. So he's been in kind of a funky mood, he's belligerent anyway. And he says, and if I get bleeped or whatever, he said, I am a self-described asshole.
Well, when somebody tells you what they are, believe them.
Believe them. And then everybody else at the dog park said, not just self-described, you are, and you're a jerk. You know, that's how people knew him.
You're not the only one describing yourself that way.
We describe you as well. You know,
we agree,
right?
Sarah.
And so Walt and him, you know, they're both kind of older guys, and this is what they do every day. Every day they're at the dog park. But some dogs, you do need to walk them every day or give them exercise, or probably most dogs. And so all that with all the other people that are up there. So it's a dog park, much like ours, like at Bayview Park. I see people enjoying that, and they have their animal, and it's supposed to be enjoyable. So Gerald Radford, and he would say passive-aggressive things about Walt to other people when he would walk by, like he's like, that effing faggot, you know, and other things about him, and people just didn't like that, you know. But what happened is they kind of had that kind of, like, these old guys type of thing, you know, that kind of, it wasn't a friendship, they had an acquaintanceship. And so they kept on, and then through the course of human events, Walt at some point gets fed up with this, and he's texted some of his other friends and said, if he gets in my way again, or if he blocks my path again, I'm going to tackle him, you know. So I think that Gerald hears something about that and decides, okay, I'm just going to push a little harder on him. So anyway, it goes back and forth. It's just so ridiculous and so unpleasant for both of them. And to add to this little mix we've got going on, they talk about politics, COVID, vaccines, mask. So this was all during that time.
Oh, wow. Those are all hot button issues, too. That's not the kind of conversation you have when you're looking for peace and quiet.
Right, at the dog park.
Right.
And everybody else has a front row seat to all this chaos. And there you've got your self-described, sour, belligerent, I'm going to call you names, and say these homophobic slurs to you.
So he's a bully.
He's a bully, yeah. And Walt just kind of takes it, but then after a while, he's tired of him. You know, he kind of pushes back and tells his friend that about, like, I'm going to tackle him next time. So things go on, and at a certain point, I think Walt tries to ask Gerald, do you want to go have a beer or something? He's
trying to bury the hatchet.
Yeah. So then as things turn out, sometimes people that he just hates Walt. He just hates him. He hates that he's gay. He hates that he's there. It's his dog park. He's trying to grieve over his dog, and he can't do it with this man over here just living his life.
So he's
apparently.
selfish, yes.
He is, yeah. So he decides that translates into he wants to have sex with him or be his boyfriend or whatever.
He's deliberately misinterpreting.
Right, definitely. So I don't know why he went there. But that is how that starts out. They shouldn't have been doing all that, talking about the dog park. It's pleasant, but that's not different than how a lot of us have taken some of the things that have happened in the past 4 or 5 years with the COVID and mask and vaccines and politics and stuff. And people can take a perfectly good time and change it into where you dehumanize the other person.
Yes, I think we do see that a lot in these cases where, especially this hate crime type case is essentially what this is, because that seems to be part of the motivation if he's using, homophobic slurs and this ongoing feud, if you will, and he's refusing to accept an olive branch. It sounds like he just wants to be offended. And I think we see a lot of that.
Right. So they get into some sort of argument and the threats go back and forth. And Gerald Radford, he said that Walt hit him with a metal coffee cup. And other people said, no, that didn't happen. And then some of Gerald's threats to Walt are, I'm going to kill you. Basically, you're dead.
And he did.
Yeah, he did. And so what happened is that they start a scuffle and Radford's packing heat.
Again, why do you need a gun at the dog park?
I don't know. He's packing heat. And so one single shot.
And he's a Marine, you said? Of course he's looking for an opportunity.
You know what it reminds me of is Pow Pow Popcorn.
Yeah, I'm a big dick. I'm going to show you how big my dick is. Sorry, pardon my French, but that's just what it seems like, you know? And again, and I have good friends that are Marines. My parents have good friends that are Marines. They're wonderful. I mean, in so many ways. But I do think sometimes when you have folks that have military training or a law enforcement background, there are personality traits that go along with that, and maybe even some mental health issues that go unaddressed from the PTSD that probably they were exposed to, the violence that they've seen. And I do wonder how capable they are of controlling their emotions. And I'm all for people carrying weapons if they feel like that's what they need to do. If you're a process server, I get it.
Oh, yeah.
If your job requires that you need to protect yourself, or maybe you've just had bad things happen to you and you want to feel protected. But this guy, based on what we're hearing, it sounds like his general attitude was he's kind of an Irish can of whoop ass in his mind,
That might be a good way to describe it. Yeah, it was like, it's my dog park, basically, and all you hear, just live in my world.
Right,
It's my dog park. But
I may take honey in my tea, but I don't like your sweet self, Walt.
Right,
yes.
And even when he was telling his days, I'd take honey in my tea, I'd drink my tea, talk to my wife a little bit, and then I go to
Lucky her. I bet she's like, here's your tea and your honey. Get on to the dog park.
There's your little dog leash. Go on down there. So, that is what happened. He shoots him with one shot and he's down. And they basically he's saying, I'm standing my ground. And it was self-defense.
Oh, I call crap on that. Just because you want to shoot somebody and say, I'm scared. Oh my goodness, I was afraid for my life. From this gay man at the dog park that I've been fighting with for a long time and could have extracted myself from the situation, but decided not to.
But I didn't.
And ended it with a bullet instead.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Right. And then
noble.
Right. Then he has to blame Walt, whatever he was doing, because this medical examiner with this case, I was watching her because I watched them the most. I guess because I medicine and stuff like that, that makes sense to me. People can say what they want to, but the trajectory of a bullet or something, we can call that whatever it is.
So he shot him when he was already down?
Well, this is what they're saying. He was saying, he was basically scuffling with me. That's the word he used, scuffling with me. But what it showed when the medical examiner, she was even showing in the most awkward way how the gun would have to be like if he had a hold of it and he was on top, because Gerald Radford said that Walt had the upper hand. But what it shows is that the bullet came through Walt from a higher angle, and they even got a big skeleton in the courtroom to show it to the jury. And because he just kept standing his ground. And they were saying...
Also, determined to kill someone
Right.
is another way to say that. To
Right.
me, stand your ground is you're defenseless. Somebody's coming at you. This is the only way that you have to protect yourself. That is not at all what seems to be happening in this case.
Imminent danger type of thing. And so the judge is like, no, you can't use stand your ground. And that kind of dealt them a blow to the defense.
Good.
They didn't like that. Well, see, I told you he was bald-headed before and clean-shaven, Gerald was. Well, I saw, because I've been watching some of the trial as it went on. Then I see him in court, and he's got like this big beard, like Santa Claus, you know.
Softening his look.
Yeah, he's sitting there, and he's leaning in, and he's just talking soft.
He just brings toys to Christmas, like to kids at Christmas.
Right. And then he's sitting there and he's like, well, you know, I can't think anymore because my dog passed away and then Walt was causing problems and I don't even know my name. So after he, you know, I mean, this is how he went. I mean, it was just like.
But he knew how to fire a gun.
Yeah. And it says mixed martial arts right here. I mean,
Right.
beat him up with your hands if you have to, you know, or push him down or what have you.
More like stand your lie, in my opinion.
Right. So he said, my memory's bad. So he shoots Walt and he calls 911. He doesn't render any aid to Walt. This is what kills me. I mean, obviously, when we do these crazy things, we are not thinking right.
Definitely.
You know?
I'll go along with that.
So he didn't,
Emotions take over.
Didn't render any aid. And I guess the sound of a shot, I can't imagine the sound of a
Dogs
shot.
must have freaked out.
Oh, yeah, everybody. And so he calls 911 and basically says, I've put my gun up on the picnic table over here, you know.
Oh, what a good citizen.
Yeah, right. And it was one single bullet, you know. So when 911 gets there, they see Santa Claus without the beard at this point, see Gerald Radford. And like maybe 10, 15 yards behind him, Walt lays on the ground. He's dead. And so they handcuff Gerald Radford and take him off. And so all the other people there, they were coming around saying, yeah, he calls him the F word, the double F word, effing, you know, all the time. And so we knew this was going to happen. We knew this was going to happen. And it wasn't self-defense. They were like, he's always the bully there. So
Talking about Irish whoop-ass?
yeah, Irish whip-ass guy. Yeah. So here they say, okay, you're being a bully. You shot him, and you've been calling him these awful names, these hate, homophobic name calling.
Just avoid each other
Right,
if you
right.
don't like each other.
Well, I mean, it's a dog park.
Right.
It's in Tampa, Florida.
Right.
It's probably a big
Go to
lake.
the other end of the dog park, right.
Or go to a different dog park or go at a different time. These people, when they
Chip
get this,
on the shoulder.
Right. The people just get this instead of conflict resolution, instead of removing themselves. So he does not get to use stand your ground. I think he might get to try to use self-defense on that. So the jurors are watching all this, and there's only one person that testifies for the defense, and it's a lab analyst. And Gerald decides he's not going to testify. And I mean, if it's self-defense, you need to testify. Nobody else can say that. So I was watching this trial and I thought, well, he's going to jail for a long time. Well, the jurors came back, and because they were going to, if he got convicted, they were going to add hate crimes to it, a special, I guess, addition,
Right.
whatever they call
it. It
that.
would seem like that was part of the motivation.
Right. Enhancement, that's what they called
Right.
it. Well, they came back and I was watching that, and they said not guilty.
Wow.
That was something to me.
But, you know, honestly, it doesn't surprise me with a Florida jury. There is just such this Wild West mentality of, well, he's an old man. He's got a long beard. This gay man was messing with him. And I hate to be like this, but I think sometimes people are just biased whether they realize it or not. And they automatically want to believe either someone that's close to their age or that has behaved in a way that they feel like aligns with what they already believe society is.
Right.
So they're not necessarily evaluating it by the facts or evaluating it like, gosh, this poor old guy, I don't blame him for being mad and upset. I have a dog, or I don't like gay people, or whatever the case may be, and justify in their mind. And I don't know what they thought. I obviously wasn't in the room with these jurors, but that is very disappointing.
Right. He didn't like gay people. They even asked him, do you not see how that would be hurtful to someone? He said, I didn't know that before.
Oh, please. He just didn't care. He wouldn't have said it if he didn't know.
That's what he said in court, though.
Yeah.
That's what he said there.
And the jury didn't care.
Right. And Walt is about his age, and Walt was a, nicely presented man, and everybody liked him. They said he was the agreeable one. He was the pleasant one. But as they read as they gave the not guilty verdict, he kind of leaned back in his chair a little bit and looked past one of his lawyers, and he winked at someone and smiled. And I was like, what did that mean?
Just like Pow Pow Popcorn Murder, he was happy too. He was like, I get to go to my daughter's wedding now. I took this father away from raising his family, but I get to go to my daughter's wedding, and I sure feel justified. And I do feel like sometimes these men that are bullies like this, and that man also had a law enforcement background. He was a retired police officer. And again, love cops. We need them. But, I do think that in every profession, there needs to be some, especially ones that carry weapons, there needs to be some sort of mental health evaluation on a regular basis.
Right.
But I do think it's unfortunate that, here we have two men in these two stand your ground similar type cases and two not guilty verdicts, and these men just walk away feeling like they're the victims.
Well, I think if you have to take a gun to a dog park or the movies, you might just want to stay at home or fence in your backyard. And
this isn't the Equalizer, man. This isn't movies,
And you're not the boss of everybody out here in these streets telling all of us how we have to act or live or whatever. And how sad that a person can't even be themselves going to the dog park. He took it from this man over and over and over. Just because someone's different than you doesn't mean you get to call them names or act, just terrible, terrible names. And other people around don't want to get in the middle of it. But that bystander effect is what always.
And they probably didn't want to get shot either.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess they knew that he was that kind of person. But the thing is, if you ostracize that kind of behavior or you don't double down and agree with it, if I see someone acting like that, whether he's got a gun or not, I don't want to be in his presence because that's just hateful. And that was a hate crime. And he didn't give any aid. And I mean, when you call somebody a effing F, you are hateful. You are full of hate. I was so disappointed in this verdict.
I agree. And I did think it was sad, too, that the jury saw a selfie video that Walt had made and recorded and sent to a friend like the day before the shooting. And he said, quote, "So this morning, while I'm walking and we're the only two here, he," meaning Radford, "comes up to me and screams at me, 'You're going to die. You're going to die.' And I asked him to just leave me alone. And so far he has." And that's what he said in the video. He couldn't have said it any more clearly. This man is threatening me. He wants me to die. I mean, even Radford himself said, "I'm an asshole. I'm going to do this. I'm a mixed martial art expert. I'm a former Marine. I carry a gun to the dog park." This was totally preventable. And it just breaks my heart that people condone and endorse and empower other a-holes to do the same sort of thing, because that's the message that's sent with this.
Right. And it's okay. If you can spin it a little bit, you can justify shooting somebody at the movies or at the dog park and still carry on with your bizarre, hateful behavior. And I'm at the point in my life when somebody starts acting like that, I want zero to do with you.
Agree.
I just don't want to be around it. I'm not trying to be ugly or anything, but that's not my jam. I don't want to be around that.
Right. I don't want to be around hatefulness. I don't want to be around ugliness. And I do think that sometimes people don't have a problem with it until it happens to them or someone that they love.
Right. So how do we undo this? The man's dead.
Well, it certainly isn't having a trial in Florida.
No, it's not.
Sure.
No, I mean,
the
that's
law and order state.
Right. No justice. No justice for them.
It's the law and order for the biggest bully in the room, apparently. So anyway, well, thank you so much, Pam. We sure cover a lot of crazy cases here on Gulf Coast Confidential.
Yes, we do.
There is no shortage of trauma and just terrible things that happen to good folks through no fault of their own. And things like that can happen to everyday people too. And when something bad happens through no fault of your own, you often need a personal injury attorney. You need someone who's going to fight for you. People who are hurt through no fault of their own would be up a creek without a paddle without one. And I know if I needed a personal injury attorney, I know who I'd call. I'd call Zarzar Law. He is a champion for his clients, and we know that. We've talked to him about clients that he's represented on cases we've covered right here on Gulf Coast Confidential. He's represented former patients of plastic surgeon Dr. Ben Brown, who was arrested for the negligent death of his wife. He's also representing the widow of Mr. Bill Bryan, who died when Dr. Shuknowski mistakenly removed his liver instead of his spleen. So these are tough cases, and Joe Zarzar is not afraid to take those on and fight for the rights of his clients. And he's also active in the community.
Yes, he is. He gives back by supporting Gulf Coast Kids House, Favor House. That's just a few to mention. And then at Gallery Night once a month, you can go down there and do the legal graffiti, and those proceeds go to help in the community. He's going to show up for Pensacola.
He absolutely is. So if you need to talk to a personal injury attorney, go to zarzarlaw.com. So our next story that we're diving into, the third in this threefer, if you will, of this episode, we're calling this Nitrous Oxide is No Laughing Matter, the case of Kanye West, or Ye as he likes to be called now. I have not been following this particular bit, although I do follow celebrity news quite a bit. But there are allegations related to Ye, if you will, Ye West and nitrous oxide. So essentially, I guess he's been dealing with an addiction of nitrous oxide, according to reports. And you might know it as Whippets. I've never tried that, but I do remember hearing other people talk about it. I didn't run with a Whippet crowd, if you will, when I was in high school, but I think it was fairly common. And as I got older and I listened to other people covering crime stories, I realized it was pretty popular with young people, it seemed like. I didn't realize that nitrous oxide was such a thing, but actually it kind of came up in the Stamatolus. If you're not familiar with that episode, that goes back a little ways on Gulf Coast Confidential, but Armed to the Teeth is what it's called, and it's about a dentist that his last name is Stamatolus, who was arrested and accused of sexually abusing patients as well as his employees, and he ended up serving some time in jail over it. And some of their allegations too were that he, misused the nitrous oxide, and people would wake up just not remembering anything and not being able to recover. So I guess if you use too much, it can cause major damage or problems with your memory.
Right. Short-term amnesia, sometimes what they call retrograde amnesia, which is like, I don't remember what just happened here. I can remember when I was 12 years old. I can remember college, but what just happened? And that same effect happens with Ambien, when people take too much Ambien for too long.
Like sleepwalking almost.
Right. That, and also just you don't remember it. You just can't remember it. Or you start doing things that are perfunctorily. Some people that are on like Ambien or Zolpidem, they'll say, I got up and I cooked the whole dinner last night and then went back to bed, but left the oven on or stove on type of thing. So this is the Whippets, or the nitrous oxide, is like the amyl nitrate and the things that people like to huff and sniff. People like that because when you sniff or take something in through your nose, right, it is like within seconds. And it's a intense little blip and then it's gone. So the trouble with that is the trouble with every other drug that changes the way you feel. That first high, you will never get it again and you will chase it forever, no matter what the drug is.
So sad.
It is sad. But because people a lot of times say, why do people take drugs or why do they do that? Well, it's kind of logical. People don't like how they feel or they're hurting, whether it's psychologically, physically, emotionally, spiritually, some sort of way. They want to change how they feel. And what better than something immediately? You can do it right now. Same thing with cocaine. People do that and go do a presentation or go play a game or do something that takes a lot of strength and they think they're good at it. They may appear to be good at it at first, but after you're still chasing that high, you become clumsy and uncoordinated and muscles start atrophying and things just are not working that well. Well, all this with Kanye is a result of like how popular nitrous oxide or Whippets are on TikTok.
Okay.
That is a new thing. They said that...
A new old thing.
A new old thing, right.
An old thing on a new platform.
Right. And so we're going to get into how this isn't just the Whippets that people are doing from the almost used up Ready Whip can.
Right. That's, I think, what the little bit that I'm familiar with, that's what I'd heard.
And that's what people do every now and then. And that is not safe, and you can literally mess your own brain and mind up. It just
so
don't
many
do
of
it.
these drugs do that these days.
They're club drugs, though. People get into the clubs, not the Ready Whip, but the little amyl nitrates people can pop. They give that to people at a ball game or something when they've knocked out or something, smelling salts with that. So we've got nitrous oxide, which is a much more pleasant thing. When I used to go to the dentist, I wanted nitrous oxide because I did not want to remember what just happened. You feel the pressure and stuff. So it's a drug. It is a very good drug. It is just being misused, the nitrous oxide.
Like so much that's out there that can benefit people.
Well, we have a mentality that 1 is good, 2 is better, 3 must be out of this world. So,
that's understandable.
That's
if I'm feeling good after 1 or 2, gosh, it must be really good if you do more.
Right. That's how we do. Well, on the TikTok challenge, there's a man and he does the Whippets and the nitrous oxide, and his voice goes way deep and sultry, and people are like, what just happened there? And for some reason it just lit up. It just went viral. Well, it had been rumored that Kanye had a nitrous oxide addiction because he went to get his teeth. His teeth are titanium now, and he's got the jewels and stuff in them because that's what he likes.
It reminds me of that old James Bond episode where the bad guy was like nicknamed Shark or something, or what is it, Jaws? I think it was anyway.
Metal teeth?
Yeah, something strange like that.
Well, he has titanium teeth, and they're lightweight. Titanium's lighter weight than any other of the metals, I guess.
Okay.
And his doctor is Dr. Connolly, his dentist, and that's, guess where? Out in California. And so we've got this guy out in California. They call him the Dr. Death of dentistry. We've got the other Dr. Death.
Well done on the alliteration there as well.
It did, didn't it? Well, so that Kanye, they say he has relapsed. Now, this is all alleged, but it's everywhere, that he has relapsed on the nitrous oxide. He had been away in Japan for about 6 months, and he didn't do it when he was over there. I don't know if it was friends or access to the doctor or dentist or what have you. But when he came back, they're like, what is wrong with him besides the usual crazy?
Right.
Because how do you know when he's doing something crazy?
The difference? I agree.
So
I watched the Kardashians.
Right. And he even out Kardashians the Kardashians.
He does. I don't think they want to be riding that crazy train anymore.
Well, I'm glad they don't. I really am.
Unless poor Kim has to, because she's got children with him.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So he is something else. But he came back and he started acting extra bizarre, especially being very racist and misogynistic and
Well, that's
arrogant.
kind of consistent with some of his other themes of late.
It went over the top because there was a guy named Milo Yiannopoulos, and he was his chief of staff when Kanye was running for president. Sorry, I had to giggle there, but that's when he was.
I remember that, Kanye West for president.
Right. So Milo, he noticed this on him, and he kind of turned him in, and he turned in the Dr. Connolly, the dentist.
Right, because he was basically saying that the dentist was supplying him with this, knowing that he was addicted.
Right. And it wasn't just that. He was supplying him with that, but he has got him up to a $50,000 a month habit.
Wow. Now that sort of reminds me of our friend Star that passed away.
Right, exactly. And that's what we're going to talk about too in just a little while, Matthew Perry with
so
ketamine.
Sad, yes.
These drugs are such good drugs. I'm a pharmacist. I know when drugs are useful, which most of them are, until we take them and abuse them by overusing them.
Opioids are a great example.
Definitely. So Milo, he turned him into the California Board of Dentistry. Okay. And he said, not only is he doing this with Kanye, he's doing this with a lot of black celebrities because they have the money. It's kind of new money, and it's caught up, like we were talking about. You don't like how you feel right this moment? Do a little with it. You'll get a little numbness and you won't care, and then move on to the next thing. But you will never get that high again. Or
that brain cell back.
Right. And so Milo is a disgruntled employee because Kanye had fired him, but I think he's hired him back now, But he has the text. He's got the receipts back and forth with this dentist and Kanye on there. So a lot of people are like, well, you're just making that up. And then like you were talking about, we got Matthew Perry with the ketamine, Elvis, Michael Jackson, Prince, and my favoriteest star of ever, Marilyn Monroe. She just needed a good friend, it seems like to me, and not be around the barbiturates and the downers, and that was her drug of choice. I mean, when you're the most beautiful woman in the world, and you're found dead laying across your bed because you're overdosed on Seconal, that's very sad. But so it's a different stratosphere that we live in. We don't live in like that. They can afford anything and do anything. So his friend, Milo is his friend. He's trying his best because this is also known laughing gas.
Right. And it's not good. It's hard to watch somebody destroy themselves.
Right. And there's nothing funny about it. Nitrous oxide, the nightclubs, the ball games, the concerts, and people basically are just huffing this. It is the third most abused drug in the United Kingdom. We're not there just yet. They have marijuana, cocaine, and then nitrous oxide.
Wow.
So what does that tell you?
That's so interesting. And plus, it's probably easier to come by as far as like over-the-counter purchases like we talked about with the Whippets. Maybe that's like the introductory drug, if you will. But these medical suppliers, it's essentially what these, drug dealers with a medical license or have the good stuff, it sounds like.
Right.
And these people have the money to pay for it.
And then they're dead. They wake up dead. I mean, Elvis, he's gone. Prince, gone.
I know.
Michael Jackson, it's just Matthew Perry, and all of this we know this. It's
taking
in our
advantage
lifetime.
of people's weaknesses, their addiction, and then just feeding that and playing into it. That's so sad to see that happen. I am glad to see, though, that Milo said that apparently the FBI and other law enforcement agencies have launched an investigation into this, and that needs to happen.
Right.
It doesn't need to be so easy to do, for one, and then if you have accountability, then maybe the next doctor is willing, to pull back and not do that if there's somebody thinking about it.
Oh, yeah. And there are people, we talked about, like in Ben Brown's office, he kept his little drug cabinet open like the mini bar at the Hampton Inn.
Right.
It was just
That's what the health department said.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of times, office, this is rare, but people have access to the nitrous oxide and they'll just take a little hit of it. That's what the doctor or the dentist or the pharmacist or whomever's in charge of the inventory, you can't just leave it out and about for people to do. But that's what we keep seeing. And then people go, well, they got into it on their own. You're supposed to take care of that, and that's what I just see is happening too much. There's just not a critical path of who's responsible for it.
Right. And then when you have that celebrity and you have that kind of money, I guess it's easy to have people around you that will manipulate you and tell you what you want to hear, even if they really don't have your best interest at heart. That's what I think the situation was with Elvis. And the little bit that I've read about that is that basically anyone that spoke in concern of his drug use and his behavior, he cut out of his life because there were others around him that were benefiting too much from his lifestyle, even though it was detrimental to him and clearly took him out. Like, I think that happens over and over and over again. They just end up being surrounded by yes people.
Right.
And then like we've talked about, you can overdose on yes.
That's right. They do overdose on yes. And the side effects, Elvis, they think, and there's not exactly 100% this way or the other, but it makes sense. His drug of choice was opioids. Well, opioids slow down your gastrointestinal tract so much that you have severe constipation. And Elvis was on the toilet when this happened, and you can die from basically trying to go to the bathroom.
Gosh, that's so sad.
It is.
That's
and then
certainly not a glamorous way to go.
And that's what I say about drugs. They have all the money in the world. Addiction is real. Addiction is a disease. Do you think Elvis Presley wanted to die between the wall and the toilet?
Oh, that hurts my heart.
Mine
with his
too.
little girl in the house.
And then Lisa Marie, she dies of a bowel type obstruction.
She also
later.
had issues with opioids.
And then this right here, these whippets and nitrous oxide, one of the main things is it decreases your B12 significantly. And, that kind of, you have side effects from that. So it's not just the drug. And then the long-term effects are, these folks are worried about if Kanye can even run his music dynasty, his clothing dynasty, because he's not even they're like, he ain't even make no sense. More than usual,
Yeah, and I think that's the point of bringing this up is just to warn parents, warn folks, and any young people that may be listening as well. I certainly understand there's so much out there and you're being offered all these different things and you're like, well, what's the harm in trying something once or twice? My friends are doing it or whatever. But the problem is it's such a slippery slope.
Right.
And it can do permanent damage so quickly. And not everybody's built to be able to handle it once or twice, whether it's health reasons or addiction wise, they might be built to become addicted. And so that's the tough part.
Right. And people can get it like TikTok. TikTok got this going.
Yeah, Galaxy Gas was the nickname on TikTok.
And then usually, like when we were teenagers and stuff, I know definitely when I was, you were usually in company of other people. So, I mean, you have your peer pressure and one way or the other. Some people are like, that's not good to do because all this copycat stuff. I mean, we see these things where people do these ridiculous things like where they do a marshmallow contest, see how many marshmallows they can put in their mouth at Easter time, and another kid tries it and they suffocate. So, I mean, when our psychological well-being is affected by this too, because we don't necessarily show everything we're doing. A lot of secrecy with the internet.
Absolutely. And they don't talk about the symptoms of when it all goes wrong. Yeah, you have this video that shows up with this guy suddenly with the deep voice and it seems cool. Well, they don't show you when somebody's going through withdrawals or when they're having a bad trip, if you will, the hallucinations, the seizures, the not making sense, the brain damage. There's not any videos on that to show you what these consequences are.
Right. And then the other drug that's always thrown about right now is fentanyl. And you never know what's coming up with other drugs. Fentanyl gets snuck into almost everything because they use that to cut other drugs with. And we don't have to see too many videos about that because most of those end up with the gravesite.
Well, I appreciate that, Pam. I think that's a good story to mention because we certainly don't want to see other kids or other young people, old people, whatever, going down the same path. So I hope for Yee's sake and his family's sake that this is something that he can come back from.
I hope so. It was a relapse, so that's part of addiction, and he can get through it again and hopefully not relapse.
Right. And if you have any questions about this or know somebody who's got a problem, or maybe you yourself do, we've got a number there on the screen for you to give a call to learn more about this and where you can get help. So that is that for the threefer, but we do have a few other cases that we wanted to update for you while we've got you here. If you follow any of my stories in the Pensacola News Journal for folks that are local, I've been following a story of a Milton family who is now seeking answers after their son was allegedly snatched from the house by a Santa Rosa Sheriff's deputy. This all happened Wednesday, January 29th. He's special needs. He's 20 years old. His name is Xander Cash. He has deficit attention disorder. He also has mild case of autism. He lives at home with his mom. She's a single mom, and he helps take care of his younger brother, who's 11 years old. And part of that means that he walks him home from the bus stop every day, and he checks the mail, and he, because of his special needs, his disabilities, if you will, he has headphones on all the time, and he also wears a hoodie. Mm-hmm. So he had this hoodie on and the headphones, and he said it helps him focus, and he always blasts his music. But anyway, so in a nutshell, he was walking his brother home from school. They go into the house. He goes back out to check the mail because his mom wanted him to check it. Has the headphones on, has the hoodie on, goes out, standing in the road, texting with his mom, checking the mail, sees nothing, lets her know what's in there, and then he walks back into the house. Well, as he's in the house, he starts to take the headphones off, and he hears all this yelling and pounding on the door, and it's the sheriff's deputy, he said, that is demanding that he open up and come outside. So he opens it up because in his account, Xander's account, this is actually the first time that he's heard this man. So he's standing there, he says this officer's name is McPherson, and that McPherson was telling him, you need to step outside. And he said, why? And they go back and forth like that a couple more times. And then McPherson, according to Xander Cash, as well as his neighbors across the street, this officer basically grabs him by around the chest, the upper collar, so hard that one of the neighbors, Paul Boykins across the street, said he could hear it hit his chest. And I interviewed this family. I interviewed Xander. I interviewed his mom, Emily. And Emily was not there. She booked it home from work to be there when her younger son started crying. But basically, this deputy grabs him, pulls him up off his feet, according to witness accounts, as well as Xander, and then throws him down on the sidewalk. Now, this kid has scoliosis. He's actually got titanium rods in his back. Fortunately, according to the family, he didn't have any health effects from this, but it certainly has caused some stress and some anxiety because he didn't know what he had done wrong. And they still are waiting for answers. They still don't know what he had done wrong. So the young son, the younger brother, calls mom on Facebook Messenger. He's crying. And this is all a shock to Emily Cash because she sat there at work where she works at a furniture store. She had just been texting with Xander about having stew for dinner. Oh. And he says he checks the mail for her every day because she doesn't like to do it when she comes home from work because it's usually dark outside. And she's afraid there might be spiders in the mailbox. Oh. So it's sweet, Yeah. And so anyhow, he checked it, let her know there wasn't anything, was in the house, texting about stew. Here's the deputy, gets dragged outside, according to all of them. And that's when the neighbors see him get thrown to the ground. And Mahalia Magruder, who's another next door neighbor, lives right next door to Paul. Both of them live directly across the street from the Cashes. She starts going live on Facebook, on social media, and this video racked up like 4 million views, y'all, at last count. Now, I think she may have taken it down. I went to go look for it the other day and I didn't see it. But I know there's copies that certainly exist. At any rate, long story short, the family went to an attorney to find out if there were potentially, because they did not feel necessarily comfortable talking to the sheriff's office about what happened without being represented.
Right.
Because it was such a crazy, chaotic situation. Happened while mom wasn't there. She gets on the phone with the deputies. The younger son gives her the phone, his phone to the deputy so they can talk to her. And she said she's driving home, 25-minute drive, going as fast as she can legally without hurting herself or anybody else. And she said that she got 3 different stories, basically, of why they detained him. And the first story was that he had been detained because this came from the first backup officer in the scene. He tells her on the phone, well, your son ran from the deputy, so he went up there. Well, that apparently there's no corroboration for any of that. The second story came from McPherson on the phone, who told her, well, he met the profile and then he didn't elaborate, and she didn't follow up because she was driving and listening at the same time. And then she said by the time she got there were 5 deputies on the scene, and that McPherson told her then that he had seen Xander standing in the road and just went up to the house to tell him that that wasn't safe, that you shouldn't stand in the road. And she said, well, then why did it escalate to the point where you grab my son and throw him to the ground? And he didn't have a response for that. So according to Xander, and we've seen his shirt that he was supposedly wearing, that they said he was wearing, brand new one that he just got himself for Christmas. And there's all these holes up around the collar, like goodness. 3 holes where it was just, basically pulled and ripped. And then once they threw him on the ground, they handcuffed him and put him in the back of the patrol car and asked for his name and information. They were running him through the system, and he gave him his information. But this kid really doesn't have a lot going on record-wise, because he doesn't work outside the home. He doesn't have a regular driver's license. He still has a learner's permit, and he has an unusual spelling to his name. So they tell him, I'm Xander Cash, and I guess the family was under the impression that they couldn't find any record of him in the system because of the unusual spelling of his name. And the deputies came back, and one of them told him, you better give us your real information or you're going to face even more charges. So this kid's like, what have I done wrong? I don't even know. And it was interesting interviewing him because you could see him rocking a lot, which I think is one of those
comforting.
Yes, those symptoms, if you will, of that sort of special needs. But at any rate, it was just a sad situation. And she made sure to say that she, Emily Cash, that she was a supporter of law enforcement. She'd worked previously for TSA, and, so she'd always taught her sons to back the blue, is how she put it. And she said, now they're afraid of law enforcement a little bit. They're hesitant to even go keep their routine and walk back and forth to the bus stop anymore. And they just have no idea why this officer behaved the way he did. But the neighbor's impression, their attorney's impression, and Michael Mann, as well as the family's impression, is that this officer, McPherson, was angry that Xander was not responding to him, that he had been yelling for him, according to the neighbors, when he sees him out there in the street, and perhaps had seen him walking with his brother, from the bus stop, and was hollering for him to stop. And the kid never did stop. He just kept on going into the house. And according to Mahalia, he just this deputy hustled on up and was pounding on the door and was angry. So the whole story of, I was warning him that it's not safe to be out on the road, doesn't really bear a lot of weight, considering what the neighbors were saying and what Xander's account was. But the kid was never charged with anything, and ends up, and he's small. He's like 5'3", 120, 125 pounds. So he's not a big person. And it was just shocking, I think, to the community, to the neighborhood. And the sheriff's office has declined any particular interviews about this case, but they did release a couple of statements basically saying that they were investigating it. And according to Emily Cash, they have finished this internal affairs investigation, but they have now sent it for administrative review, and they're waiting to hear back. But they did think it was interesting that they were not asked for an interview about it. They were initially, and she said, well, okay, I'll let you talk to Xander, but I want to have counsel present because he's not comfortable. And then they shut down and didn't repeat the invitation again. So they didn't want that, I guess.
Well, it's just the hardest thing in the world for parents. A lot of children have to be, I guess, what you call latchkey. They go home after school, and he wasn't doing anything wrong, it doesn't sound like.
No,
walking
not
away,
according to them.
walking toward him. And if you've got most everybody I see these days has at least one earbud in, and folks like to wear hoodies. That's a style that folks like. And I can understand, we can't go around roughing up everybody that's got an earbud and a hoodie on, because especially if they're walking away from you. But also what it teaches us, even like as a deputy or a person in business or a reporter, if someone can't hear us or acts like they can't hear us, communication is everything, and if you've got a gun, you've got the jump, you know what you want to do, maybe get in front of him, and say, hey, I'm talking to you. Because they put their life on the line every day, the deputies and the police. And
absolutely.
The sheriff department and everything.
It's stressful.
Right. But we've all got to learn to do better. It's like, is there something so wrong with wearing a hoodie?
Mahalia Magruder, the neighbor across the street, you can hear her in the video, her and Paul yelling at these officers, this is wrong. What you're doing is not right. This is a violation. How do you treat this kid this way? And you hear the deputy respond, and it must be McPherson. If it's not, it's one of the other deputies. But one of the deputies responds, I couldn't see he had headphones on. I didn't see that. And then later on in the video, you hear him say something contradictory. So it sounds like whatever the case was, he was not happy that this kid had not stopped.
Right.
And according to Xander's testimony or his count of what happened, he's saying, I didn't hear him. I didn't resist. I was not trying to be a problem. He came pounding on my door and I opened the door to see what the problem was. The next thing I know, I'm getting thrown out and knocked to the ground and thrown to the ground. So it is a sad situation, I think, all the way around, even for the officer. So the mom was concerned, though, because she felt like, that Xander looks very Anglo-Saxon, if you will. He's just, white as white bread and long, lightish colored hair. And his younger brother has Mexican heritage. His father's Mexican, and he did not have a hoodie on. And he's got beautiful, long, dark hair and, just the olive complexion, cute as can be. They both are. And walking from the bus stop, the mom was wondering, because this was right on the heels of the real hard turn that we've taken on, illegal immigrants, and nothing wrong with that. They're just making, not to make this political, but her concern was, and that was exactly what she said, I'm not trying to make this political, but I wonder if he didn't see the two of them walking and see my young son that looks Hispanic and then the taller one with the hoodie on and assumed maybe he was Hispanic too. And perhaps in his opinion, it met a quote unquote profile of an illegal immigrant. So that's what he had in his mind and was pursuing them. And when he didn't get an answer, instead of saying, gosh, maybe there's a logistic reason why I'm not getting an answer, let me get in front of them, or whatever the case may be, it just turned into this, I believe this person's deliberately ignoring me. Maybe there's a problem here. Maybe this person has something to hide. So he comes in like gangbusters. And that was essentially what the mom's concern was. And I included that in the story in the Pensacola News Journal, and it just lit up for some people. They wanted to get their panties in a wad about, just say that a different way. But that particular aspect lit some people up. But at the same time, she has a right to her opinion, and they don't have any answers. So they are left to speculate. And that has been an issue in the community, and not that particular community. They have crime, but not to that level. So she didn't understand why this excessive response out of nowhere. And that was one possibility that she came up with.
Right.
But we don't know until they tell us.
Right. You never know. And it's all about miscommunication and conflict resolution and getting right in front of people. I a lot of times, and this is so benign compared to this, if I'm talking to someone about their prescription and they're not listening or nodding their head or something, I'm like, maybe I'm not talking loud enough, or maybe they can't see me, or maybe they don't speak English. And that's happened before, so I have to get right straight in front of them, or get an interpreter on the line, So this is like, we just need, maybe some communities, maybe we need interpreters. And I don't mean like language. I mean like, this is our culture. We like to wear hoodies and we wear this here, or walking home after school. I'm not like rolling up in here on a car on two wheels and, yelling out, party all day, party all night, burn out the weekends.
Right.
I mean, just going home.
I know. So just wanted to mention to you that we're following up on that. So, we're looking into that one too, and we'll certainly follow up. And once the sheriff's office releases their version of what happened or what they say they're doing as a result of this investigation, what their results of the investigation are, we'll certainly update everyone on that. Yeah. And one more we wanted to get into, the Take It Down Act. This is a federal bill that has passed the Senate, hasn't passed the House yet, but basically it makes it unlawful for a person to knowingly publish or threaten to publish intimate image, basically what they call NCII, non-consensual intimate image abuse. So this is to basically make someone take it down if they've put up an image of someone that's sexual without their permission. Even if it was created with their permission, if they put it up and showed it without their permission, they have to take it down.
Right.
And we've seen cases locally, past several months. I covered a case where a young man, 18 years old, had used the Undress Me app. He had downloaded numerous pictures of local high school girls, undressed them, if you will, with this Undress Me app, which uses AI technology. This law was intended to make people take these down, but that's one of the cases that came up here locally that is connected to all of that.
Right. The deep fakes and putting this head on this body and then acting like, oh, I didn't know any better. I mean, this can ruin people's lives, and it can have people, we've seen the sexting, the texting, the sextortion. We've seen all this kind of stuff where people think it's the end of the world because it's out there for everybody. And even we take it down within 48 hours, it still does some harm. So I think people need to realize this is not going to be a joke. This is for real.
Exactly. And this is a federal law. It's what people would used to call revenge porn. If I've got some image of you, I'm going to put it out there and shame you and this, that, and the other. Well, this covers AI generated image as well as a legitimate image, if you will, of a sexual nature. And just an update on that local AI case. The young man that admitted to police that he had downloaded all these pictures and that he had undressed them. He had shown them to his now ex-girlfriend. Well, Pensacola police have arrested her for basically sending the pictures because they say that she broke the law by sending them. They say, did not, quote unquote, distribute or promote the pictures. And so having them, just possessing them and creating them wasn't illegal. It was illegal to transfer. Well, there are parents of some of these girls who do not agree with the Pensacola police or the state attorney's office take on this for not charging him. Basically, Pensacola police and the state attorney's office said they looked at a couple of different laws, but that what he had done did not violate either one, but that his ex-girlfriend did. And so they charged her with basically distributing these images. Her case is still working its way through the courts. He was never charged. I'm not releasing his name because it's policy of Gannett, which is, the company behind the Pensacola News Journal, not to report the name of someone who has not been charged, essentially. And I understand that. But in this particular case, a lot of folks feel like it's unfair that she was charged and he was not. He also comes from a prominent family that's well known, politically connected, socially connected. And so I think there was some concern that perhaps he had been protected, even though the state attorney's office and the Pensacola Police Department said that was not the case. Well, one of the parents reached out to me and said that legal experts from around the country have been reaching out to her and they disagree with the results of the local investigation. They do feel like there is room for him to have been charged. And so they're now working with this parent to basically look at what happened and to see whether or not there's more that can be done with this case and also what more can be done in general to address laws that impact these families and AI. Right. Because it's not just as simple as laws aren't keeping up with technology. It's also about interpretation.
Right. Or a choice to not do it. That's what I think it is. And whatever the girl was charged with, he should be charged with. But for the fact that he didn't do it, she wouldn't have it to distribute. And also, if you go back and listen to these young girls on this Take It Down within 48 hours, the national spokespeople for it, you will cry because these girls have explained how it changed their whole life and how a person just willy-nilly can keep doing that. And they say something to this effect. You mean to tell me we can't keep up with the laws on the planet Earth about maybe this boy or girl doing that on the internet when 50 plus years ago, we put a man on the moon?
I know. And I think it's really interesting. And I don't want to say too much more because this is an ongoing, development, if you will. But just want to let you know we're staying on top of this. It's good to see our legislators federally, tackling this issue. It is important for mental health. It's important to protect our children and young people. And this can happen to anyone of any age, but certainly when you're young and impressionable and the world seems like it's ending when you've been exposed or humiliated like that online in their opinion. So just wanted to let you know we're staying on top of that, and that's a story that's not going away.
Right. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Gulf Coast Confidential. We know it was a long one, but we just wanted to share with you what we've been looking at.
That's right. And we've got much more coming up for you. But in the meantime, we will hope you will listen to our episodes anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. You can also check us out on the YouTube channel. Thanks as always to James Roy, who is our production engineer, Pam Hill, researcher and co-host, and I'm your producer and host as well, Molly Barrows. And we will see you next time. This episode is brought to you by Zarzar Law.